All right, lesson 11.2 is about arithmetic sequences. We're going to be able to find the nth term of an arithmetic sequence or any specific term. So for that, we need this formula. It says in an arithmetic sequence with the first term that we'll call T1, and that common difference we talked about in the previous lesson will be called D. Then we can find the nth term, just meaning any general term like the third, fourth, 100th, by Tn. So the formula is, you can see here, Tn equals T1 plus n minus 1 times D. Example 1. So we're given 5, 8, 11, 14. It says find an equation for the nth term of the sequence. So for that, we're using our new formula, which is, Tn equals T1 plus n minus 1 times D. So we're just coming up with a general formula. So for that, we basically need T1 and D. So T1 just means the first term that's given to us here. It's 5. So that's T1. And remember, D is that common difference. So I can see between each set of terms here, I'm adding 3. So my D is 3. So then my equation is going to be Tn equals 5 plus n minus 1 times 3. Now if I do a quick distribution of that 3 there and some combining of like terms, I'm going to get Tn equals, that would be 3n minus 3 when I distribute, but I'll add that 5 back, so plus 2. So then the next question is to find the 687th term. Now we wouldn't want to add 3 that many times, so instead we just want to use the formula. So the term 687 is equal to substituting 687 for n. And in that case, that term would be 2063. Okay, similar question here. This says find the 31st term. So this one doesn't specifically tell us to first write a formula, but we're still going to. So Tn equals T1 plus n minus 1D. T1 is our first term, so we know that that's going to be 3. And then D is that common difference. I can see that between each set of terms here, I'm adding 8. So we'll plug in 8 for that. So, doing some distribution with that 8 and combining like terms gives us that Tn is equal to 8n minus 5. So now the question says find the 31st term, and I can just plug in 31 for n, and I'll get that that term is 243. Okay, now we're going to find the 1000th term of this sequence. Same exact process. Let's first find our formula by identifying both T1, the first term, and D. Now remember, D can be positive or negative, so if I'm subtracting 10 between each term, then that D needs to be negative 10. Okay, and then we just do some distribution with that negative 10 and combining of like terms, and we get that Tn is equal to, erase that. Tn is equal to negative 10n plus 27. And now we can go ahead and find the 1000th term by doing negative 10 times 1000 plus 27, which is going to give us negative 9,973 for that 1000th term. Okay, a little bit different here. We're going to be finding the arithmetic mean, but this is something that you've been doing since Algebra 1 or maybe even before in middle school math. The arithmetic mean is the same as saying find the average. So in this case, it's literally just telling you to average those two numbers. So if you remember, you would add up those two terms and divide by the number of terms there are, which in this case is 2. So that's 5.7. So just to give you a little bit of background about where that comes from and how that relates to what we're doing now, basically, consider you have an arithmetic sequence. You have 2.3, and then some number in between, and then 9.1. So if we try to find our formula here, we're going to notice that we have Tn equals, let's write it, T1 plus n minus 1 times d, okay? And in this case, we would be trying to find our common difference d. So look, this is T1, we don't know T2, T3. So let's plug in, we know T3 is 9.1, so let's plug that in. So when n is 3, and then we know T1 is 2.3. So, okay, so let's solve that for D then. So we would do 9.1 minus that 2.3, that equals 2D, and then we divide by 2. So D equals 3.4. So if I come back to this problem up here, if I took 2.3 and used my common difference of 3.4, I'm going to get 5.7. And then 3.4 more than that is 9.1. So that's another way, that's using the formula to find the arithmetic mean, but it does the same thing as finding the average, which is what you remember from, your previous math class. So now let's do that with a few more numbers in between. We're going to do it more similar to this way now. So we have 15. We're trying to find 4 means between. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're trying to fill in all of those spaces. So let's start again with the formula. We have Tn equals T1 plus n minus 1d. Now I'm going to do what I did before and use the two numbers I am given. So I know T1, and this would be T6. So if I use that higher number, T6, so I'm plugging in 6 for both of my n's there, then I just need to plug in T1 and I could find D. So T6 is 45, T1 is 15, that 6 minus 1 is 5, and now I can solve for D. So 30 equals 5D, or 6 equals D. So now I have the common difference, and I can go ahead and just add 6 between each term. So I have 15 plus 6, which will give me 21, plus 6 is 27, plus 6 is 33, and plus 6 is 39. And there we go. Okay, our next example says how many terms are in the sequence. So essentially we're solving, this question is saying what is your n? That's what we're solving for. So we're given T1. I can see that here just by reading it off. And I can also tell that my common difference between each term, I'm subtracting 8. So that's two things that I'm given, and now let's look at the formula that we have to work with and see what we can get from this. So I know T1, I know D, and I'm trying to solve for n. So then the only other thing I would need to know is Tn, which is why we're given it. We're given the very last term here. That is Tn. So basically we have something to plug in for everything except for n, and we can solve. So Tn is negative 380, T1 is 44, plus n minus 1 times our common difference of negative 8. And that's it. We can now solve for our n. So we're going to get 44. If I distribute, minus 8n plus 8, and then go ahead and get n by itself, you'll get 54 just with that basic algebra. So what this is saying is negative 380 is the 54th term in the sequence. It's supposed to say in. There we go. Okay, in this example, we're given two terms of the sequence. They're not the first terms, they're not the last terms, just two terms kind of right in the middle. So T8 and T12. And then we're asked to find a different term. We're asked to find the 40th term. So, okay, I always like to start with like, what is it that I'm actually trying to find? So I'm trying to find T40. So I know the formula goes T1 plus n minus 1, so 40 minus 1, 39, times d. Okay, so I'm thinking to myself, with the information that I have, I just need to find T1 and d. Now, I'm definitely not just given either of those. I'm given T8 and T12. So I'm going to have to work with what I'm given to try to find T1 and d. Now, essentially, think about what you have. You have two unknowns and two pieces of information. So hopefully that's kind of ringing a bell in your head that you're going to need to set up a system of equations. So let's look at setting up an equation for the T8 equals 60. So the formula we have is that Tn equals T1 plus n minus 1 d. So let's plug in what we do know just from that T8 equals 60. So if T8 is 60, we still don't know T1, but T8, our n is 8, so that's plus 7 d. And that's all we can go there. That's all we know. We know just the Tn and the n. Let's do the same thing here. If Tn or T12 is 48, we don't know T1, but we do know n is 12, so then 12 minus 1 is 11 d. So that's as far as I can go with that equation. But now, as you can see, I have a system of equations. And I can solve these to get T1 and d. So let's stack them on top of each other. So we have 60 equals T1 plus 7d, and 48 equals T1 plus 11d. So let's say I want to get my T1s to cancel. I would just need to subtract this equation. So 60 minus 48 is 12, and 7 minus 11 is negative 4d. So then if I divide by negative 4, we get d is negative 3. So that's great. Now, just like we've done with systems of equations all year, we can go back and get T1 by plugging it back into either of these two original equations. So let's say I pick the first one. I can say 60 equals T1 plus 7 times d, which we now know is negative 3. And then we'll get that T1 is 81. Now, after all that, we can finally go back to solving what we originally wanted to do, which was take T1, we now know is 81, plus 39 times d, which we now know is negative 3. And so in the end, we'll get the answer to this question is that T40 is, left room for my negative sign, negative 36. Okay, that's 11.2. Check for homework on Schoology.